Guess who's back? Back again. DL's back. Tell your friends. Guess who's back? Guess who's back? Guess who's back? Da-na-na-na-na. Oh, hey, how are you guys? I'm back. I guess we should get into the show, huh? All right. Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I'm your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed that really corny, goofy skit. Yeah, I was just being silly. I didn't have a quote that seemed to be fitting for today's show, which I usually try to do. I try to find a quote that kind of matches the theme of the show, and so I just kind of went with this goofiness. All right, so we are back now. Uh, let's start with this. I want to give a message to my Spotify, iTunes, and other podcast folks. I want to apologize for the wonkiness. There's been some disruption. I've not been quite consistent, and that's because, as you know, if you've been listening to some of the past episodes, I've had a laptop issue where my laptop, the battery just was like super swollen. It was like huge, and so I had to have that replaced. And so I decided at the time, I was like, you know what? I might as well take this opportunity to make some upgrades while I'm at it. There's not too many upgrades that you can do on a laptop, but I decided to do that. So that's what's going on with the disruption. Going forward, hopefully, we'll get things ironed out and be more consistent. So stick with me, folks. I appreciate it. If you're in the podcast group, because, and I'm specifically talking to you guys because I don't generally get I don't get much feedback from you guys. So I don't even know who you are. Like maybe I can figure out how to, engage with you guys. So stick with me. I'm glad that you guys are downloading and listening to the show. If you can, throw me a message. You can send an email to libertydadpodcast@gmail.com, or you can find me on Twitter or Facebook or wherever and just be like, hey, you're doing a good job. Thank you so much. Or, hey, you're doing a terrible job. And this is the last time you'll ever see me. Whatever you got to do is what you got to do. But I just wanted to point out to you folks. Now, status of the show. Where are we? Are we totally back? Kind of mostly. We're mostly back. So, like I said, the battery swole up. And so I was like, all right, I'm not going to use my laptop. And we could get into the details of like, oh, well, you could just take the battery out and still use it, plug it in, make it a desktop. There's pros and cons to that. But anyway, so I ordered new equipment. I ordered a new battery. I ordered a new hard drive because when I purchased this particular laptop, I was foolish and I did not get a very large hard drive. And I found the hard way that when you're dealing with video files, it becomes very problematic very quickly. And then I ordered new fans and I've ordered memory. So like we're doing a full on upgrade here with the laptop so that it'll be beefier and better going forward. The new battery came in, the new hard drive came in. Those were installed successfully, so we are good to go. The fans have come in. However, they were not the correct form factor, so they actually didn't fit. And it was a shame that it wasn't OnlyFans. Okay, sorry about that. I'm in a mood today where I'm like, if you see me on social media, I'm probably going to be like poking and making jokes at people all day. I'm in one of those moods today where I'm going to try to be funny. So it's Dad Day. That's where we are. And then I've got some memory coming in that won't be here for a few more days. So we're not entirely up, but because the machine is functional, well, let's get back to it because I really, really did not like using the phone. Although a little shout out to Rumble Studio, they did create an app and you can actually stream live from their mobile app. So that was really cool. And like I was able just to put it up here right in front where my camera normally is. And I could I could actually stream and I could even see the comments as I was going along. So it wasn't actually that bad. it just wasn't as suitable for my particular needs, but it was actually pretty neat. I like it. So kudos to them for that. All right. Let's get into I got several topics today. We're just going to kind of go into this easy. There's so much to talk about out there. There's like so much going on. It's like I missed a couple of days. I missed a few days and it's like the whole world just like goes bananas on me and I'm like, "Wow, what in the world?" So, first things first, there was this now you if you're not on social media, you may not be familiar with this story or this personality. But I don't really want to talk about the person so much as the response. So there is an influencer in the conservative sphere named Ashley St. Clair. I don't really know much about her, but she came out a few days ago and acknowledged, said, like, hey, reporters have been snooping, and apparently she is having a baby by Elon Musk, allegedly. Now, I don't really care who has a baby by Elon Musk. If it's true, it'll be like his 13th child. And like kudos to him for like having so many kids, like I guess, right? But here's the thing. The response was just very interesting to watch because a lot of people in her circle kind of circled the wagon in a sense and they were like, hey, congratulations, having a baby's great, blah, blah, blah. And then a lot of people were criticizing and they were like, wait a minute, I thought you people were all about family values and, sexual morality and all this other stuff. And then the response back was, what? Did you just want her to have an abortion? And it's like, wow, it was amazing to watch because like people on the internet tend not to be who they present themselves to be. Right. Like and I think that for the most part, most people are probably not who they appear to be on some level. Now, some of them are maybe and some of it's not intentional, right? And we'll talk about another one here in just a moment. It could just be that you're posting all the good things about your life, so it seems like you got a really peachy life when maybe things are really down in the dumps for you. Or you've got a lot of trials and tribulations, and you're just kind of putting on a fake. You're putting on a front. Um, but this isn't new, right? So this is kind of why I want to talk about it. It's not really new. Anybody that's and I like to call people my age the olds. Anybody that's an old might remember the names Jim and Tammy Faye Baker. This was like back in the 80s, 70s, and 80s. And they were very famous preachers, or he was the preacher and she was his wife. And they built this really huge ministry. I think they had they were televangelist, I believe. And um, in the late 80s, well, I think it was like the late 70s, you started hearing these rumors about sexual impropriety by Jim and something to do with his secretary. And then as things started coming out and, whatever things started happening in the late 80s, I think the story really kind of broke that he allegedly, and I don't know the details exactly. I didn't really go research it, but so I'm going to leave it at allegedly. But he allegedly drugged and had relations with his church secretary, and then there was a whole bunch of issues with money, hush money, and stuff like that. And it was a big scandal. It was huge, right? So this has happened before, and you can continue to see it, right? Like these kind of things. Fast forward to 2023, here in Florida, we had this what they call a power couple, Christian and Bridget Ziegler. They were caught having tryst with other women, and then there was also allegations of rape as well. And who are they? Well, he was the chair of the Republican Party of Florida, like the whole Florida, right? And it was interesting because like Republicans, conservatives, they do talk a lot about family values. And yet here you have this man and this woman, they're caught having, inviting other women into their bedroom effectively. And what makes it more interesting is that he's the GOP chair for Florida. And she, Bridget, was a co founder of Moms for Liberty, right? And you might remember Moms for Liberty. They were really big on the kind of books that were being permitted in schools. Like they kind of led the charge. And I agree with that. Like I think there's a certain type of book that doesn't belong in the hands of like say junior high and elementary school students. High school students are a little bit different. They're a little older. They're already exploring these topics, right? They're listening to it in their music. They're talking about it with their friends. Some of them may be experimenting, right? They're already there. So I'm not nearly as worried about high school students, but junior high and elementary school students, yeah, big deal. And so I think they were right to kind of pursue this and say, hey, look, there are some issues with these books. Now, how everything played out, and the laws that got passed, that's an entirely different topic. And I wasn't always pleased with how things played out there. But the point being, like these kind of things have occurred. And so I've shown you one from the 80s, showing you one from 2023. And then if you just dig in the middle, all through those years, you'll find plenty from Republicans who generally consider themselves to be conservatives, family values, you know, a man and a woman, you can't be trans, all this stuff. Right. And then they have these things. Now, me personally, I infrequently discuss morality that is not tied to my fundamental view of the individual. The reason for that is, number one, if I were to, if something were to happen in my life that becomes a distraction to the message, and I don't think it's a good thing. I think we should focus on the message that is irrelevant to the person necessarily, right? Like, and what I mean by that is, and I'm not trying to like this is not like pre-cover for something that's about to come out, guys. So don't think that. I'm just having a conversation here. So, like imagine that something comes out about me and my wife. Well, if I've been talking about morality and blah 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 yada yada, that's going to not only look bad on me, which it should, but that's also going to look bad on the message. And it's going to be a distraction to that message, which is a good message. And so I think we have to be very, very careful, um, because the reality is that human interactions altogether are messy. And they're messy to the point where people make mistakes. They're messy where sometimes allegations are made and it takes a long time to undo those allegations. And when I say undo, I mean like for the truth to come out. And oftentimes, by the time the truth comes out, it's too late. The damage has been done. This is why, like, you have like the Billy Graham rule, where, or you might call it the Mike Pence rule, where many men, many religious men will say, I will not be alone with a woman unless my wife, well, I won't be alone with a woman ever. If I'm with a woman, my wife or some other woman that I trust has to be there present. Right. And that's because, well, one of the reasons, it's not the entire reason, but one of the reasons is because if I go out to lunch with a woman and then we walk in the park, for instance, we just take a walk in the park and maybe we're talking business. And then later she makes an allegation and says, DL tried to come on to me. Well, I can't, like, you can't prove a negative. So if I didn't do that, the amount of effort that I'm going to have to go through to prove, in quotations there, prove that I didn't do that is tremendous. And for some people, it can never be proven. Like, it just like, hey, believe all women, that kind of thing, right? And so this is why you see these kind of things. So for me, it's better just to focus on, as a libertarian, on the things that I have, that I can feel more confident that there won't be any mistakes or errors or allegations that will distract from the message. So if I say like taxation is theft, well, I'm not taxing anybody. Now, it's possible that I could go to the poll and I could vote for, some sort of amendment. In Florida, we like our amendments here. So I could vote for an amendment that adds more taxes. And in that particular case, I become a hypocrite in the same way. And I should be held accountable for that. But let's say that I'm telling you taxation is theft, and then I have a moral failing, right? Like any or a perceived moral failing, right? Because it can be either or. It can be an actual or it can be perceived. Well, that doesn't change and necessarily impact the message. Other people can pick up the mantle. Like, let's say I do something dumb, right? And now I'm being held accountable for it. People's trust in me is lost. Maybe I will get it back, maybe I won't. But now I've got to, set my podcast aside, set aside any public appearances of any kind, and just go and work on myself, right? Well, somebody else can come and pick up the mantle of taxation is theft, and they can say, "Hey, look, just because he screwed up doesn't mean that taxation isn't theft." And so on and so forth, right? And so this is why, this is one of the reasons why I've moved away from being a Republican and a conservative politically. Now I tend to be more conservative personally, but not politically. And the difference between those two is that conservative, as a personal thing, is how I live, and maybe I just make some judgments in general, but I'm not actually trying to impose it upon anybody else. Whereas if I was a conservative politically, I would actually seek to have legislation kind of reinforce or enforce my views upon everybody else. So to me, that's the distinction. And so I try to focus on the things that are really related between the government and the individual, because the likelihood of any kind of mistake is far less. If there is a mistake, it doesn't damage the message. And then somebody can always pick up that message and carry on with it for whatever reason. Maybe I just am, maybe I get tired and one day I just like, you know what? That's it. I'm done. I'm done doing podcasting. I'm done being on social media. I'm just going to go and do woodworking and, tend to my yard and try to grow the vegetables that right now are very, very tiny in my garden. And just to let you guys I've been growing some sweet peppers for like months, literally months, like 6 or 7 months. And they started flowering like a month or so ago. And then I finally got a bell pepper, and it's like the size of it's like the size of my son's fist. It's tiny. And so apparently I've got some learning to do on how to grow. It's supposed to be bigger. Like I was envisioning a much bigger one, but it's not. So that's the point behind the joke there. So for me, I think we have to be very, very careful when we're putting these judgments out there, because as they say, it's biblical, right? For the conservatives out there that are religious, however you judge, you will be judged by that same measure. And that's what was happening with Ashley St. Clair, is that, and people were digging up tweets where she was quite directly saying, hey, you should be, family life and, marriage and all these other things. Right. And then it turns out that supposedly she's having a baby from Elon Musk, who she's not married to. So again, the issue I think most people had is not that it was, it's not that it was she did the deed so much, again, if it happened, it's not so much that it happened per se as it was, hey, this conflicts with who you said you were. And we have a big problem with that. And then it was weird because people were coming back and they're like, whoa, what would you like her to have abortion? And I was like, well, no, that's not why people are angry. They're not, nobody's like, I can't believe you should have had an abortion. Like nobody said that. And this is the kind of interaction that you see online. This is what we have to be careful with. And this is why I do the show, so that we can become better thinkers and we can become wiser in our interactions with people. Because yes, while online is not a real place, it is filled with real people. Bots too, but real people. And so if I say something nasty to you online, yeah, online's not a real place, but you're probably going to take it personal. And then when I meet you, you're probably not going to have good feelings about me. And so I think that we should really work hard to have our to engage in the same way online that we would in person. And then to take it a step further is that we need to present ourselves in a meaningful way, because when we make a mistake or when there's an allegation, we're going to want that grace from other people. You make a mistake, if you have a and people do, people have moral failings all the time. And I'm talking about simple things. I'm not like, if a man is got a podcast, I'm gonna step away because I don't like. I mean, I don't like to name somebody specific in these kind of analogies. But let's say there's a man that has a podcast and he's very religious and he presents his conservative side and family values, and then you find out that he's beating his wife. That's not a mistake. Okay, that's not what I'm talking. That's a moral failing for sure, like a great big huge moral failing, and he should be punished severely for it. But when I'm talking about like even simple things, right? Like let's say that he presents that he's always a calm guy and he never gets angry at people. But then like there's a recording somehow of him like berating his wife and calling her all kind of nasty names, right? Like that's a pretty big deal, don't get me wrong. It's just not quite as big of a deal as physical assault, right? And so, you know, maybe that wasn't the best example, but I'm just kind of thinking on the fly here. Like you have a moral failing of some sort, and then people see it, you're going to want grace and say, "Look, I made a mistake. Please forgive me. I'm going to go and work on myself and I will come back to be the person that you want me to be." Cuz that's good human interaction. That's what we want in a society. People will make mistakes and we want them to correct themselves, and we want to make sure that we are giving grace for them to correct themselves. Also, if people if people haven't done something, then we want to make sure that we have a little bit of grace in case we find out that the story wasn't as presented. So if somebody gets accused of doing something and then it takes a long time to, find out like, oh, they actually didn't do that. Well, we want to have grace along the way so that we don't cement ourselves in with that judgment. So that's where I am. Excuse me for a second. I got something in my throat there and it's causing me to want to cough. So that's where we are. Just wanted to kind of touch upon that story. Again, I don't really care so much about like I don't care that the GOP was having, threesomes with other people. Like I don't care about that. That's their business, as far as I'm concerned. But if you are presenting yourself, if you are leading people and you're telling them, uh, this is the way you should behave, then you ought to behave that way too, or at least be upfront about it if nothing else. Say, "Hey, I think you should do this while I do something different." I mean, I wouldn't follow you for sure, but at least you're being honest. I'm a big fan of transparency. Be as transparent as you can with people and let them know, right? Like if you're into something or like what was it? I saw a random account, not a random account. It's a pretty big account. It's like some news account. And apparently there was some we're not even going to talk about it because try to keep this show relatively family oriented. But I guess he's gay and he has some other interest, if you will. And that information came out. And so again, you don't have to tell everybody everything about your life. But if he were grandstanding about morality and saying like these things are bad while doing them, then that makes him a hypocrite and worth all the scorn that he gets. Right? And that's not the case here. His account was just a news account that would break news, and then somehow people discovered some of his private life, put it out there, embellished it supposedly, and so now he's like, "Look, the embellished parts that you guys are really, find disgusting, and you should. That's not true. The parts that maybe you find kind of weird, yeah, that's kind of true, but that's my private life, and I try to keep that separate." Right? So, this is why we want to have these conversations periodically because we want to create a better society. It's not all about just politics and policy. There are interactions with other people. We need to make sure that, we extend grace when it's time to be graceful. We if people need to be judged, I do not oppose it. Sometimes people have earned it and they should. All right, let's get to some comments here. And then I'm going to go to intermission. We'll come back and we will talk about some other things. So let's see here. My VA lady says, I was going through Liberty Dad withdrawal, and I can see that. I can see how that would be a thing. Um, uh, I'm sure that Big Pharma has medication that they want to present to you guys if RFK doesn't ban it first. I'll be talking about that in the future. I'm working up some stuff. I've been doing some digging. So, but I do appreciate everybody sticking with me. And by the way, my VA lady is, it helps produce the show. So make sure you give her some kudos. Let's see what else we got in here. Um, that Liberty lady, was the swelling battery huge or huge? I mean, I don't have the picture readily accessible. I still have it, but it was pretty big. Like there was a distinct difference. I try to it was amusing. I was like, wow, this is huge. Let's see. Uh, Joe asked, he said, "Hey TLL, did you hear that rumor about DL and his wife?" I mean, there might be a rumor. I don't know. Spread one, see if it gets any traction. I guess. Do what you got to do, guys. No, seriously, don't do that. My wife will make she might assault me. She's conservative, by the way, so she doesn't have to follow the non-aggression principle. Throwing that out there, guys. So try not to get me in too much trouble with her. Let's see. The difference between personal belief and respect of others' belief is government force. I agree. Now I will say this. That comes from Joe. I do think that there is a place for cultural criticism. And I discussed this on my episode, and I don't remember which one it is, but it was my episode on libertarians engage in the culture war? And I think we should. But in just to very quickly summarize, I said what we should do as libertarians, we should identify the things that we can safely ignore. You know, um, if it's from Kanye, you can probably ignore it, right? Like there's just a lot of things that you could just ignore and be like, yeah, I don't care. Then there are other things where maybe we have a conversation about it. So, for instance, we talk about, okay, what about this issue of Ashley St. Clair and Elon Musk? Well, we can ignore the actual relationship or alleged relationship or how we can ignore that part of it, and we can actually have a discussion and say, hey, look, you presented yourself one way, you promoted an idea, and then you're not living up to it. That we can have a conversation on. And then there's going to be this like small little section for people like me who are not an anarchist. It's going to be a small little section for which we might say, "Hey, this maybe we do need some legislation here, right?" So like murder, like I'm cool with having legislation against murder, right? Against stealing people's property, right? There are certain pieces of legislation that I do support, right? And so I'm not always against it. And for me, I look at it and say, yeah, the difference is, government force, and government force should be used at only when we're protecting the rights of other people. Like that's when we should be using government force. Anything else, if it's important to talk about, then we have a conversation and say, this is how a society can deal with this without government force. So I totally agree, but I do think there is an opportunity to have various conversations. All right. So I'm going to go to break here real quick, take a little intermission, and then we'll be right back. And I've got two more interesting stories that we're going to discuss. So be right back, folks. Hey, Liberty fam, do me a favor. If you enjoy the show, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button to my channel. And for the really serious folks out there, I want you to hit that bell so that you never miss an episode. By the way, if you want to support the show, head over to libertydad.locals.com and sign up. For $5, you can be part of this show. There, I'll engage supporters of the show. We'll discuss topics that you want me to talk about, response videos that you would like to see, or anything related to the show. And I'll even have a monthly subscribers only episode. By the way, I'm always looking for dads to join me for Dad Talk. That's my series where I invite everyday dads on to talk about what's important to them in the context of being a dad. No argument, no debate, and dads choose the topic. It's my way of raising dad voices. If you're a dad or you know a dad who has something to say, let's get connected. Episodes air live on Friday mornings or Friday evenings, whichever works best for dads. All right, let's get back to the show. All right, folks, we are back. Let's dive into this next one. This next one also happens to deal with online activity, big account, what's going on. This is a little different. This isn't now somebody's private life. This is their persona that they presented online. So you might or might not have heard of somebody that went by the name Patriarchy Hannah. And I didn't follow her. In fact, I only saw the name occasionally. If I really dug deep, I could probably find where I've made some commentary, because the way I work, I let the algorithm do the work for me. Like whatever it shows me, if I see something that I think is interesting, I just comment on it. So I don't really go looking for stuff, and yeah, I don't, I'm just like whatever. I'm already online enough as it is, so I just, and so apparently, and hopefully I get this all correct. Apparently, she presented herself as this trad wife, traditional wife, and this is kind of like the wife that stays home. The husband goes and works. She cooks dinner. She cleans the house. She raises the children. She's got a loving husband. They go on picnics together. All that kind of stuff. Like very, very Norman Rockwell esque kind of life. That's what's presented, and I believe that she had presented herself as a wife of a man that where they both went out and adopted a whole bunch of kids. And I think maybe part of the story was that they had some of their own kids, but there was like this brood of children that they supposedly had, like 14 children or something like that. And they had this nice little uh, plot of land that they lived on that was kind of like out in the woods, the outskirts of town or whatnot. And some of the kids were adults, and they raised them so well that the kids didn't want to leave, go too far away. So the kids like lived basically down the road. They could, and they had this just great, just wonderful, picturesque family life. And then people found out none of it was true. I think she even presented herself as like, thin and attractive, by typical beauty standards, and turned out that she was normal looking, a bit overweight, and wasn't married, and might have even lived with her parents. I'm not really sure exactly. I didn't dig too deep into this. I just kind of paying attention to things that I saw come up again from the algorithm. So all it turned out to not be true, and people were pretty outraged over this because a lot of people really believed it. And I think she gave a lot of advice, and she was like, "Look, if you want to have the life that I'm living, you should do this." And I don't know how many people actually did the things that maybe they did some of the smaller things. I don't really know. But I know that a lot of people followed her and they felt really betrayed. And so I'm going to talk about this because here's the thing. I know a lot of people, like for me, I might, because one, I'm a guy, two, I'm an old, so I didn't grow up on the internet. I grew up in real life where you met people and that's how you interacted. Like I didn't get the internet until like somewhere in the early 2000s, like the real internet. I mean, I think I had dial up before that, but there wasn't a whole lot of interaction. It was basically you would go to like the AOL chat rooms, and in the first you jump in there and people like ASL, and there's and usually, and we all knew it was probably some dude, some creepy guy, right? Wanting to know your age, your sexual location. And so there wasn't a lot of interaction. You didn't really get behind personalities. You might have went to a chat room on a regular basis and become online friends with somebody, but it was relatively limited, especially compared to what we have today. So I didn't grow up with that. So for me, it's not going to be like I'm not going to get so worked up over these kind of personalities, just because I have experienced life in an entirely different way, and that changes how I interact on the internet. Right. So I'm not going to be as easily lured into these kind of things. But younger people like my son, as he gets older, he's not on the internet now, but as he gets older, he'll be on the internet. And this is going to be common life for them. So we need to have a conversation and say, all right, how do you best protect yourself? So let's talk about this story real quick. Let's see. I'm going to pull up an image here. So this is after all this blew up and people found out that she was not even close, not even remotely who she said she was, right? Like, then she came out and she made this post, putting it up on the screen here so that you guys can see it. I will read it for all my Spotify and all my podcast folks. So here's what she said. She went by the name Harmonized Grace. Patriarchy Hannah was her actual name. Her tag was Harmonized Grace. I just want to say that I'm sorry for the lies I told and the hurt I caused. I never intended for this account to become as big as it did. And once things started snowballing, I enjoyed the relationships I'd built and didn't know how to put an end to it. It was wrong of me. I've repented of this behavior and will not be back on X. I think technically she is, but maybe not. I don't know. Again, I'm not following her. Going on to the next image here. She says, she goes on to say, I'm sorry to everyone I hurt with my lies. Some things that have been said are true, and some things are wildly inaccurate. But I don't see a point in sorting it all out. The bottom line is that I'm not who I presented myself to be. I'm not going to be giving my reasons for why I started because I'm not looking for sympathy here. It was wrong, and I humbly hope that you can all find it in your hearts to forgive me in the future. Please stop reaching out to my family. They are aware of the situation, but are very freaked out by people trying to make contact with them. They didn't do anything to deserve this attention. I'm sure you understand. And so that's the end of what Hannah had to say. So from other posts, it seems, again, I have to be careful because I didn't research this to find out. I'm not digging in, but it would seem from some things that I've read that she might have been married and her husband may have passed away. And then she started this persona of what she was hoping to have, and then it grew out of control. That's an assumption. I don't know if that's actually true or not, but let's say that it is. Okay. There's two ways we can look at it. Maybe it's true. Maybe there was a lot more honest intention. And maybe she just wanted to start and be like, you know what? I'm going to create this persona and I'll get a few follows and it'll be fun. Right. And then it blew up too big, whatever. So either way, it's a lie. If you're not who you say you are, you're lying. Period. Plain and simple. Okay. Um, and you should be held accountable for that. Now, it's possible that maybe she it's as she said or alludes to that she something started, it snowballed and it got out of control. And that makes sense. That happens with people. I have seen that in real life where people go down a path and it blows up way bigger than they intended. Sometimes it's a disastrous and it costs them their life. Sometimes it just costs them their friendships, right? Like, you get mixed in with the wrong crowd, and before you know it, all of a sudden maybe you're engaging in all kind of crazy violence that you never thought you would be, or maybe you're doing hard drugs that you never, right? So this, even though this is online, this is a story, at least from what I can tell, of human behavior, normal human behavior. So the question is, well, how do we protect ourselves? Because again, I have a 5-year-old son, and I'm like, well, one day he'll get on the internet. It's gonna be a while, but one day he'll a 6-year-old. I'm sorry, he's 6. I'm used to it. He just turned 6 like a couple weeks ago. But I have a 6-year-old son, and one day he's gonna get on the internet. He's gonna meet people. He's gonna follow people. He's gonna, some influencer is gonna be exciting to him. In the same way, when I was growing up, some musician or movie star or whomever was exciting to me. Right? Like I remember growing up, and for me, one of the personalities that I really really liked was Bruce Lee, and I like watched every Bruce Lee movie, and then I watched all the movies that were related to Bruce Lee, like ninja movies and karate movies and John Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal, blah blah blah, and then I would go outside and I would, me and my friends would, pretend to be ninjas and all this other stuff, right? Like it played a significant role in our life, and it's shifting now. So now you're going to see a lot of that online. And there are personalities all over the internet for which this can happen. And it's not going to be just children, because as younger people grow up and become more accustomed to the internet, then they too run the risk of being bamboozled like this. And and I don't want to say no shade to them. Like, I know I do. I want to say no shade to them necessarily. Why? Because it's easy to say, "Oh, you shouldn't have fell for that." But the truth is we all fall for somebody that's not who they say they are. Well, maybe not all of us, but a lot of us. Even in real life, it happens. And so if we just ignore it and pretend like, "Oh, you were just being a dummy," well, then we're not helping our fellow man and woman. And like I said, this podcast, I want a better society. I want to do more than just stop bad legislation. I want to influence people to be their better selves. you know and to a degree we all are. I don't want to say we put on because that makes it sound more active. We all are somebody to another person that maybe is more of a personality or a persona than our real life. Here's how that works. Sometimes we get on there. I have the Liberty Dad persona. It is in most ways who I am. In other ways, I'm a work in progress. The difference between me and somebody like Patriarchy Hannah is that I am actively telling you, like, yeah, here's my failing. Yeah, here's not. This is what I probably should be thinking, but I'm not. Right? Like I'm very upfront about it. So there should be no illusions that if I say something kind of rude to somebody, you shouldn't be like, wow, I can't believe he said something rude. Like, no, I'll tell you. Sometimes I will be rude to you, right? And it's not necessarily a good thing. Sometimes I'll justify it. Sometimes I'll have to be like, yeah, I shouldn't have done that, right? What I'm doing is just saying, here's what I want out of society. Here's what I want in my own family. And here's how I'm going to go and do it myself. Sometimes it's a learning process for me. And I'll tell you guys about it. Like, yeah, this is who I want to be. When I first came up with Liberty Dad, I wasn't even a dad yet. It was a persona. And I was like, what kind of dad do I want to be? And so I said, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to present it this way, and I'm going to let people know. And as I grow, you will see it if you follow me long enough. And you can go back and you can see different things where I've talked about things and said, here's where I was at one point. Now here's where I am at this moment, so on and so forth. And so this is a good thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing that we have a persona online. Sometimes it's unintentional, very unintentional, right? So mine is intentional, but not to deceive. Like I'm just very transparent and I try to be straightforward with everybody. Some people will try to deceive you and they need to be held accountable for that. Some people, they won't do it on person. Let's say that you're really all about economics. You like it. You want to present economics. You read all the economics books, but you also like to play video games. You also like to play board games. Maybe you go out and you have your own garden. Maybe you like to go to the beach. Maybe you like certain activities, exercise and whatnot. Maybe you're a foodie. You like to go out to different restaurants. But maybe when you get online, you just talk about economics. Well, people are going to see that and they may get the perception that your whole world revolves around economics because you might not talk about being a foodie. You might not talk about going to the beach. You may not talk about, the guy or the gal that you met at the bar the other night or wherever, the bowling alley or what have you, right? You may not talk about those things. So you're going to unintentionally get or present a persona that other people will see. And so then the real question is, how do we protect ourselves from getting too involved or too invested in somebody else's persona or, feeling like we've been betrayed? How do we do that? I've got three things that I think we can do. And I think these are going to be these are going to guard you. They're going to be good lessons for our children as they grow up. And I'll be teaching my own son this as, when he's appropriate. You don't have to worry about it now. He has no online accounts. He doesn't get to go online and chit chat with anybody. None of that. Right? He's 6. So yeah, it's gonna be a while. Number one, keep an appropriate distance between yourself and anyone that you have not met in person. Right? This helps protect you physically, emotionally, and potentially financially. Right? Mentally as well. Right? Like you have to keep this separation. It's very much like in the real world. There are people that I know who I'm an acquaintance with, and there are people who I'm friends with, and then there are people who are like really good friends. If it's a really good friend and I have an argument with my wife, I may go and like divulge some information to them. Information that I may tell them about. I may say, "Hey, man, can I bend your ear a little bit? You know, wife's driving me crazy, blah blah blah, whatever." And then, but then I might have regular friends where I don't talk about that information with, right? And then I have acquaintances where I definitely wouldn't say that. Right? So we already keep this separation. We need to do the same thing when we're online. Keep an appropriate distance between yourself and anybody that you've never met. If you've never met them, they should actually rank lower than an acquaintance because they could present especially with AI now. AI can make some really good pictures, that look pretty decent. And then then if you're very, very clever, like we can kind of tell when we're looking at an AI generated image. And I don't mean just like the fingers and all that, but you can just tell like the way that it's drawn, the vivid colors, all that. You kind of can tell. But then somebody could throw it into Photoshop and they could do some editing and make it look like a real picture, right? So it wouldn't be hard to deceive somebody, and say, "Hey, yeah, this is what I look like. I look like this attractive woman," when really you're, a short, bald, and mediocre looking guy who wears a ball cap talking behind a microphone. Not that I'm pointing out anybody in particular, but y- they should rank lower than somebody who's an acquaintance because you haven't even met them, and you don't want. You have to create boundaries for yourself online in the same way that you do in person. And to be honest with you, look, a lot of people, they have trouble with boundaries in person, and they're going to definitely have trouble online because it's easier to blur that boundary line and with yourself. So again, keep an appropriate distance between yourself and anybody that you have not met in person. Like I put out a post the other day and I was like, you kind of related to this whole Hannah patriarchy thing or patriarchy Hannah. And I said, hey, look, I'm real. Just wanted to let you know because like got podcast. You see pictures of me and my wife and my son. A lot of people in the libertarian community have actually met me in person. A lot of them have met my wife and my son, especially here in Florida. In Florida, a lot of people, like more so than outside of Florida, just because when I go to an event that's not in Florida, chances are they're not with me because my wife hates politics. She don't care, and she's not a libertarian anyway. And I'm not just saying like, oh, she's not a real libertarian. Like, no, she doesn't identify as one. So I can totally say that. Um, Number two, here's what you can do: believe only what you can verify. This is why I pointed out. And I said, like, look, I put out things like now right? Is this person posting pictures of themselves and their children or their spouse doing normal things? Sometimes the normal things are trivial. Hey, look, here's a picture of me and my kid, and his first, his first bell pepper that he grew, right? Like that would be a seemingly normal thing, not something that you would expect somebody to lie about, right? So if it's something that an acquaintance or a friend might tell you about, then that's more likely to be true. Okay. And then like, hey, chances are this person is who they say they are. Now, again, you should keep a proper boundary, even if they are who they say. Like, if you're following me on social media and you've never met me, you should rank me lower than an acquaintance that you know and actually like. I mean, if you have an acquaintance that you don't like, then maybe you can bump me up a little bit. But you should rank me lower because you haven't even met me in person. How do you know I'm not a jerk? You don't know. How do you know that you might come up and say, "Hey, DL Liberty Dad, I love your show," and I go, "Yeah, whatever," and I walk away. You don't know that. You don't know what kind of personality I have. Like it could be for show. You don't know. So you should rank me lower and you should only believe what you can verify, right? And verify is like if I tell you that I've got 14 children, but I've never shown you 14 different children, or I've never shown you a whole bunch of different children doing different things. Like, hey, here's the kids today. They're out digging holes in the yard because they want to dig a hole to China. I don't know if kids do that today, but back in my day, they kind of did that. So, like if they're not showing you things that you might expect the neighbor kids to do, then maybe they're not who they say they are. Number three, match your skepticism with the allure. What do I mean by that? The more, the more it seems, like this lofty, just I love your life. You've got such an awesome life. The more the more of that there is, the more skeptical you should be. Now, this is because people are naturally going to post things online that are good and positive. I'm not going to get on there and post every time I have an argument with my wife. In fact, I'm probably not going to post it almost at all or ever, right? Like, because that's kind of personal to us. And not that we fight a lot. I mean, we're married and it does happen. We get into little arguments every now and then. Like that's normal, you know. But if so it's more natural for me to post things like, "Hey, look at us having fun," at Disneyland or wherever, right? Look, we went on a wine tasting. Look at us having, enjoying date night, whatever. Like I'm gonna post those things. So you might get the impression, like again, that hey, he's living a good life. Um, but the more of that there is, if I'm just like, hey, look at us, we're world travelers, we're doing this. We just bought a really nice car. We just bought this brand new house. And it's just all super nice, 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 awesome, great. Wow, what a great life you're living. You should be more skeptical because it's basically the old saying holds true even today. It's too good to be true, it probably is. Right. And if somebody's not occasionally telling you some struggles that they have or some, frustrations, then they're presenting a certain persona, which is okay. I don't have a problem with that. Maybe somebody doesn't want to divulge, the arguments that they have, and they don't want to, and you really shouldn't actually. But maybe they don't want to, like if they were studying really hard for a test, a certification, maybe they don't tell you that they failed it the first time. Maybe they only tell you about how when they passed it, right? So that's fine. But if they're not telling you any of this other stuff, if there's not a mix of really cool stuff, kind of good stuff, mediocre stuff, and maybe occasionally bad stuff. If there's not a mix of that, then maybe you should be more skeptical. Like that's going to help. That's going to go a long way with you because that protects you internally, personally, so that you don't have to deal with the ramifications when that unravels, if and when it unravels. Because let's put it this way. Let's imagine there's an account that I follow and I'm just all into it. And I'm like, man, everything they do is so awesome. And then I find out that it's all complete BS. It's all complete crap. Like, it's not true. And then now I'm saddened because, like, I was hoping that that could be my life. Well, guess who's not there to deal with that? That personality. They're not there. And so, if you're old like me, this is probably yawn, no big deal. Of course, DL, yeah. If you're the kind of person that's like, look, I'm cool with online, but I'm keeping a big distance because it's online, privacy, et cetera, et cetera. If you're really big into privacy, then maybe it's not, maybe it's not for you. But this is still a good message that we need to talk about because there are likely millions and millions of people for which this message applies, especially our younger people growing up. And I want my son, I want your sons and daughters to have this good message. That's what part of what being a Liberty Dad means is say, hey, we have to have these conversations from time to time. So there's that. So again, real quickly, just summarize. Keep an appropriate distance between yourself and anyone you haven't met. Believe only what you can verify. Match skepticism with allure. Let's get into this last topic. I'm probably going to run over just a little bit, but that's okay. Because it's Dad is musings. You haven't seen me in a while. Some of you are jonesing. You need your Liberty Dad fix, so we can do this. We'll do it kind of quickly. So we'll bring this up on the screen here. So this is an interesting article. I just saw this actually this morning. So apparently there's something called the DOGE Dividends. I don't know if you've heard about this just yet. I think it came out yesterday. I think the news broke yesterday about it. So let me get this up on the screen here. I didn't actually have this one quite so ready, but I can. Bam, there we go. Okay, so there we are. Musk mulls, and I'm gonna make it a little. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit so you can read it there. Perfect. Musk mulls sending all Americans $5,000 checks using Doge savings. So ads, of course. Uh, Billionaire Doge head Elon Musk said on X, formerly known as Twitter. Can we stop doing that? Just say X or just say Twitter. Anyway, he would ask President Donald Trump about a proposal for a Doge dividend that would give taxpayers a refund check of $5,000 funded by savings from his Department of Government Efficiency. James Fishback, CEO of investment firm Azoria and reportedly an outside advisor to Doge, pitched the idea of a quote tax refund to be sent after the expiration of Doge in July 2026, funded exclusively with a portion of the total savings delivered by Doge on social media on Friday, and continued posting about it Tuesday, tagging Musk in a tweet about the proposal. So I guess this is actually older than I realized. The proposal calls for 20% of Doge's targeted $2 trillion in savings to be returned to the about 79 million tax-paying households That's important. I can get that. And then it says Musk responded to Fishback's proposal saying he will check with the president. And that's basically after Musk's response to Fishback gained traction, he responded to another tweet about the proposed dividend couching the comment. Can't read today. Couching the commitment slightly, saying, obviously, the president is the commander in chief, so this is entirely up to him. So the big question here is, are we all going to get a whole bunch of money? What is the impact of that? Well, here's a few things. Number one, my gauge for success of Doge is more than just getting rid of stuff, more than just finding where money is being spent that it shouldn't be, whether it's being, whether there's abuse there, fraud, or whether it's just, hey, we've got a crappy system that needs to be overhauled. It doesn't matter to me. Fraud is obviously worse, but like ultimately at the end of the day, money is being spent. And if money is being spent, that means money has to be taken from the taxpayers. And so the first thing is to identify what it is. Then we have to stop that money funnel, right? Like it has to stop. Then the third thing is we have to stop the taxpayers from having to give that money in the first place, because otherwise the government is still getting that money and they can use it for other things. They can just say, okay, well, now USAID isn't getting this money to go to wherever they're funding, but we're going to put it over here. Well, again, it's still my money. And just because you found a better place for it doesn't mean that is what I want. So, so my measure of success is basically, can taxpayers show that they have a clear and unambiguous lower tax bill? So, like if I was making $50,000 a year in 2024, and then I just had, small incremental raises as I was going along by 2026, 2027, can I show that there is a significant drop in my tax bill from, say, 2026, 2027 to 2024? I'm just using those as dates just to kind of have a conversation. Can I show that? Because if I can, and if millions can, then Doge is a success. If we can point that and say, "Yep, you paid $3,000." I'm just making up numbers. You paid $3,000 in taxes, and now you're only paying 1,500. Like you had a tremendous drop, and you paid 1,500 the last 2 years. Okay, and and we can point to other numbers that say, "Hey, here's where money is not being spent that it once was." That to me is the marker of success. And it's interesting because we we all got on board. I mean, most people were on board with the idea of Doge, but I don't think anybody really had a very clear-cut measure of success. And I think that's where we made a mistake, America. We didn't have a clear cut. So now they can do whatever they want effectively. They can say, "Hey, we cut spending. We diverted it, maybe, whatever." But if they got rid of fraud and then just dedicate the money elsewhere where they can say it's needed, well, they still were quote unquote successful, right? And many people will accept it. Whether I would or not, it's not really relevant. Many people will. So we actually never had this idea of success. Um, the other thing that we have to consider, $5,000 is a lot. And if you're getting a $5,000 check in 2026, ringing a bell, anybody? Anybody knows what happens in 2026? Mid terms? Might be a great time to win uh, more congressional seats, right? So I'm just saying, like great timing, guys. This is pretty good timing. Just throw my little skeptical hat on, and but again, like you should get, like if you paid $5,000 in taxes, you should get $5,000 back. If if they can show that they could pull the waste from it. Now, in some cases, you won't get it back because it's been spent. Can't get that back. And we could have a conversation about whether or not the money should go toward the debt and all this other stuff. Like, sure, and it probably should. But the real question here is, like, what is the measure of success? And is this a good idea? The other thing I saw floated by somebody, they pointed out that if Congress doesn't cut spending, and if other things don't happen, which there's a good chance it won't. I mean, even Thomas Massey, who libertarians and conservatives generally, he's well received by libertarians and conservatives. He came out and he said, "Hey, look, I fear that Congress is just going to go ahead and continue doing the same old, which means that all these cuts and all this work might be for naught. And if that's the case, then I would say Doge is a failure. And here's the problem, folks. If you go back through the years and you look at any number that has come out about the government, any number, employment, spending, debt, the deficit, it's almost always contested, right? Like the Democrats will be like, oh, Joe Biden, under him, this many jobs, like here's the jobs report. And then the Republicans will be like, yeah, but here's what you did. I massage those numbers, blah, blah, blah. Right. And they do that back and forth. All these numbers are contested. This is why I want to know, what did the American taxpayer actually pay? Like, did we actually pay less taxes? That's to me the measure of success, right? Did we let people go, right, from government that didn't need to be working in government in the first place? Did we let them go and not rehire them? Did that money that was being spent, did we have a change in the tax brackets? Because a change would mean less revenue, because less revenue was needed, right? So I think there's a lot that we need to be on the lookout for here. Now, this DOGE dividends has not been confirmed. It's speculation. And I wouldn't have talked about it except for that Elon Musk was talking about it. So if Elon, and he's got a direct line to the president. So if he's talking about something, the president is going to at least hear it. So what I was going to say is, another friend, somebody that I follow, we follow each other. He pointed out this would be, if Congress doesn't cut all these things and change the way that they're doing business, we could end up in a situation where we have universal basic income. And you might say, well, DL, the cuts can only go so far. You are correct. But remember, the president just recently created that sovereign wealth fund, which, when you look at other sovereign wealth funds, they do a great job of generating a lot of revenue. And so this could be, speculating, this could be a path toward universal basic income. And so we may reduce our tax load, but we may end up in a situation where we get universal basic income and other things that we don't like. Now we're getting down the path of conspiracy theory. Like, for me, if you ask me, I will tell you, because you are asking me by watching, I will tell you, I think the end goal, whether it's intentional or whether it's just what will be, the end goal is a social credit score. It is universal basic income. It is more control over our lives. So be on the lookout for that. Last point that I'll make on this, it's going to be interesting to watch everybody who said and has been saying, I didn't vote for this. Oh, if you didn't vote for this and $5,000 checks go out to households, will you be taking it? Just saying. It's a bit of an issue with your integrity, right? If you didn't vote for it, if you've been screaming bloody murder about Doge and all the things that's going on, and you're critical of it, maybe you turn that money back over to the government. You say, "Yep, I want to maintain my integrity. So therefore, being an honest person, I will give this money back because I not only didn't believe this would happen, but I actively worked against it. I was actively opposed to it, and I said that people that were doing it or supporting it were fools. So, hope you guys have integrity." I doubt it. $5,000 is a lot of money, right? It's a fair amount. I mean, if you're a billionaire, it's probably not. But for most of us folks, $5,000, that can go a long way. All right, let's check out some comments, close the show. We'll have a good day, and I'll be back tomorrow. So let me see here. Let's take a look here at the comments. Let me go back up and see where we left off. Let's see. Just do a couple comments here. Online personas, Keith says, are often very different than real life, switching to old man storytelling mode. Absolutely. Like, even mine. Like, my online persona is not the same as real life. And the reason is, again, not necessarily because I'm trying to hide something. It's because there's a lot more that goes on in my real life. that can't be put online at a minimum, right? Or I'm just going to want to show you the cool stuff. I'm excited that, like, I posted a picture the other day of my son getting a new stripe on his belt. A picture of him and his instructor for jujitsu. And I was like, hey, look, my son got a new jujitsu stripe, right? I don't tell you about the time that we drove there, he fell asleep and there was crabby and we ended up turning around and going back home. Like, instead of going to jujitsu class. You don't hear those stories, right? So one way or another, the persona is not entirely real. But if you come over to my house on a Friday night to hang out, I might tell you that story. So then you're going to get some of those stories that you might not see online. So at a minimum, it's simply a matter of those stories just don't make it online. And then you get all the way to where people are just fabricating the entirety of their persona. So we do have to be mindful, and you are very correct, Keith, that online personas are different than real life. Let's see what else we got. Do to do. Yes. Another Keith. Another comment from Keith here. You should never meet your heroes, except Thomas Sowell. Definitely. Whoa. Wait. What? What? You got to, you got to meet Thomas Sowell? I'm jealous. Not even gonna lie. That would be so cool. That would be cool. He's like 94 years old, so probably not gonna happen at this point, but that would be so cool. I'm not gonna lie. But otherwise, don't meet your heroes. You can meet me, but I'm just a regular, everyday guy. Nothing special about me, right? I got a podcast. I got a family. Sometimes things go right. Sometimes they go wrong. So if you want to meet me, don't be surprised if I'm just, how do they say it on the internet? Don't be surprised if I'm mid. I'm mid. I'm mid looking. Got a midlife. I'm just mid. Anyway, let's see what else. Let's see what else we got here. Um, a good point here from Joe. I didn't vote for the wars, but I have to accept that as well. We do have to accept some things from time to time, and maybe there's an argument to be made where, hey, I'll accept that 5,000, not me, but people will accept the $5,000 even though they were opposed to it. And to be truthful with you, I'm not really going to hammer too hard on people because at the end of the day, if you paid $5,000 in taxes, then you are owed $5,000. So at the end of the day, it is still your money. I'm just pointing out that maybe you should have been a little bit more chill with the whole Doge thing. That's all I'm saying. Let's see. Yes, and Joe points that out. He says it's returning money back to me. It is. It is. So the best that we can return money back. I will never argue with the idea of returning money back to the citizens. But I might point out some areas where people maybe should have been a little bit more relaxed in their opinions. So I think that's fair. All right, folks. I think that's it for today. I'm going to head on out. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you most likely tomorrow. We will carry on with the show, and looking forward to doing some really awesome things. Have a good one. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you are there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. You can also become part of the community by heading over to libertydad.locals.com. Remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.